Take it away.
Since we're already behind, my name's John Nese, and I am always honored to do this because Ken was a friend of mine. Those of you who don't know, Ken Reeves passed away almost 4 years ago this month. He was we graduated together. He was a meteorologist at AccuWeather. He was a driver behind getting this Penn State Weather Service AccuWeather sort of partnership going. And so when he passed away, we named this in his honor. So a couple highlights. Temperatures will be slightly below average through Saturday. We do have a window tonight, maybe 12 hours wide, and maybe even early tomorrow for some occasional light snow. Storms passing low to the south. Seems to me like about a 1-inch storm. I suspect there'll be a 2-hour local school delay tomorrow morning, not for us, but for the local schools. Then there'll be a true clipper coming through late Saturday and Saturday night. It could be one of those surprises where we actually get more from that one than we do from this first one, because this first one's working on really, really dry air. But they're both minor events. The strongest signal in the models is a big warm-up in the east starting on Monday. So just a little perspective, our average high and low right now is 42, 24. That'll be up to 53 and 34 by month's end. Sun's as high in the sky today, if we could see it, as is it on October 9th, and we're gaining daylight at about 17 minutes per week now. I'll follow this up on the next slide, but whenever I do one of these in March, I like to point out that climatologically speaking, we are just as likely in State College to get a big snowstorm in March as we are in February, where a big snowstorm in my mind is defined as 10 inches or more. And one other prediction I feel comfortable with is we've seen the bottom of gas prices, as they're going to go up now that the warm season is in the future. I show this every time I do a talk like this in March. This is 10-inch plus snowstorms in State College since 1896, divided up by the half month in which they began. The climatological peak is the first 15 days of March, though there's only been one such storm in March since 1994. So perhaps climatology is changing. Though the point I want to make, though, is for those of you who still hold out hope, climatologically there is hope. I'm not sure there's any hope any other way, but there might be. I mean, March is a long month. The top 10 snowstorms in State College, the top 3, for those of you who don't know, were in March, and 5 of the top 10 were in March. So climatologically speaking, we're not out of the woods yet. Winter's over, meteorologically speaking. There's the departure from average for the 3-month period from December 1st to February 29th. We're soundly in the Pennsylvania's soundly in the sort of 2 to 6 range there. It was the record warmest in those 3 cities and a few others. Bottom right is the CPC forecast prior to the winter. Captured a little bit of the essence of where the major warmth would be, but certainly didn't capture all of the essence. That's really strictly an El Nino forecast. I mean, that has the El Nino fingerprint all over it, that forecast in the bottom right. Here's precip, as always, more piecemeal. That should say record wettest, not record warmest. I apologize. Miami teleconnects very well to strong El Ninos, central and southern Florida, so that came through. Seattle does not. Seattle does not teleconnect really at all with El Nino. In fact, if I recall correctly, the previous wettest winter in Seattle occurred during a moderate La Nina. There was also this area in the central part of the country that had some wetness: Lincoln, Nebraska, Waterloo, Iowa, a few places in Wisconsin. Bottom right is the CPC forecast from before the winter began. So, these things are tough. Central and Southern California has really not benefited from the El Nino. Not that that teleconnection is set in stone, because it's not, but it is one that is well known in the public. But a series of storms over the next few days will likely deliver, particularly northern and central California. This is the Weather Prediction Center's 5-day QPF. 2 other areas of note off the coast. This is a sign that the storm that's passing to our south tonight and tomorrow will kind of blow up over the ocean. And in fact, you may have heard in the news that Royal Caribbean recalled the same cruise liner that got stuck in the storm 3 weeks ago It shortened its most recent voyage from 12 to 10 days because long-range forecasts called for this storm to blow up off the East Coast just as it was arriving back into port. So it got back to port yesterday instead of Friday, part of their new storm avoidance policy. Of course, they don't mention in the press releases that 2.5% of the people on the ship got the notovirus, or is it the norovirus? It's one of those things you don't want to have. That was not the yeah, they were making way. That's not why they came back to port, though. It was because of the weather. There's Seattle, and this is what record-setting wet winters look like, day by day, as the surplus climbed. That's Seattle on top, Miami on the bottom. The surplus in Seattle for the winter was 10 inches. It's about 12.5 in Miami. Of course, snowfall here in the east. It's been a real drought. Really, Pennsylvania's been split. You had the one storm, Harrisburg, Allentown, Philly, New York, Washington, Baltimore. It's kind of a one-hit wonder sort of winter. So Vanilla Ice, Wild Cherry, and Lips Inc. were all one-hit wonders. Ice Ice Baby, Play That Funky Music, and Funky Town. So as far as snowfall goes, I think of it, at least so far, as a one-hit wonder winter in the Mid-Atlantic. Okay, so let's talk about the weather. So I got here in River City, we're sitting in the upper 20s. Really nice signature of two fronts going through this week. One early on Monday and then one early on Wednesday with the nice minimum in sea level pressure accompanied by rather dramatic drops in dew point and temperature. Dew point's really low right now, 11. So as this thing comes into that air mass, this takes us back 24 hours. So this is yesterday, this time, high pressure built in, kind of got some clearing, and now comes the next system. Not really a clipper, more Pacific in origin, and it's still diving off to the southeast and will actually track pretty far to the south. I'm starting to like this product from Space Science and Engineering Center at Wisconsin, kind of for the big synoptic scale view of things. Cold air mass that we've been in recently out over the Atlantic, you get some low strato Q. Here comes the next little compact storm system. You can actually kind of visualize the counterclockwise rotation there. The next one in the chain is up in here, and then here's sort of the pipeline of storms that will come into California over the next couple days. Here's the radar courtesy of the EWOL. Makes it look like some precipitation's already getting very close to western PA. Of course, we know that it's really not. We know that because we can look at the surface observations. So it's snowing in, looks like Findlay. Columbus has light snow. But look at the dew points over Pennsylvania. I got to believe that as all of this comes into this very dry air mass, it's going to take a while to do anything here. And so I'm thinking the first snowflake, well, maybe you get a rogue snowflake before dark, but this is mainly tonight. Here's the SKU-T over State College right now. At least this is what the, I guess it's the RUC thinks it looks like. Still got a ways to go to saturate, particularly in the layer where we would want to look sort of surrounding 700 millibars. So just this antecedent air mass is so dry, you really have to wonder what we can shake loose out of this. So this is the latest GFS. Just for giggles, look at a deterministic model, kind of get a sense for where the main weather features are. Here's the 500 millibar vorticity maximum and its associated trough driving this low pressure system to the south. Actually, you know, you do have some, just envision with me, sort of decent upper level divergence going on ahead of that 500 millibar trough kind of in here. And there is some warm advection tucked in between the high to the north and the low to the south. So this is an area of general warm advection that correlates nicely with the location of where the model is spitting out precip. and where it's producing high 700 millibar relative humidities. So at least that, from that perspective, that's working. The low really kind of wraps up off the coast, but too far east to be much of a bother, except maybe in central Delaware, southern New Jersey, maybe even Philly gets a little bit of extra snow from this thing. Then relatively weak high pressure builds in behind, so it's not as if we get some Arctic air mass behind this, so the dew points will stay up. The dew points aren't going to go back down. So by the time the next wave comes in, and this is more of a true clipper, I think, originating up there in southern Canada. There's not much of a reflection at the surface, but hey, you got one closed isobar there. So by the time that thing gets here, I just wonder if, and these things tend to be late for a date, so it'll come in fast, late in the day, Saturday, probably before the models say, and with the dew points already up in the upper 20s, it really doesn't have to saturate the atmosphere. So I just wonder whether that next one actually does more than this first one. I'm just saying, something to think about. Yeah, it's a decent wave. But then that thing goes by, and then seasonably cold Sunday, and then the party begins next week as trough digs into the west, big ridge in the east, and we warm up. So that's kind of the deterministic view. Here's the, not that the SREF, not that we want to take the SREF for verbatim, or that it's always right, but at least this is a model average. So there's that wave, passes to our south, goes off the coast. Here comes the next disturbance. Certainly enough agreement among the 26 ensemble members that we get some sort of a 500 millibar trough going by, and then the big ridge builds in by the time we get to Sunday and Monday. Now, it was at this point that we were having trouble with the projector, so I was not able to bring up the rest of my graphics. So you'll just have to give me a second to get this one, which is a product, a gentleman named Tom Galerno, who I think used to be at Albany, and then he went to NCAR, and he must now be at Arizona because the website's been moved to Arizona. Basically, we all know that two of the fundamental forcings for creating vertical motion are vorticity advection, which could roughly be thought of as upper level divergence or convergence, and temperature advection. All of those processes are brought together in a diagnostic equation that you'll get in synoptic meteorology called the quasi-geostrophic equation, which cannot be solved analytically, but you can solve it numerically. And basically what it does is it just shows you where air is going up and where it's going down on synoptic scales, incorporating those two important processes. So Tom apparently solves the quasi-geostrophic omega equation and displays it here for you. So let us go back to, this is 18Z today, and all you have to do is pay attention to the colors. Purples and blues indicate synoptic scale sinking. Oranges and reds indicate synoptic scale rising air. So here's the pocket of synoptic scale vertical motion, upward motion associated with tonight's storm. Notice that the Pennsylvania, for those of you who can't see like me, is about in here. The best forcing is to our south. That goes by quickly. We get into some synoptic scale sinking later tomorrow. But here comes that next wave right there. And for that one, the best forcing actually passes right on top of us. This is 18Z Saturday, so it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And by the time you get to Sunday morning, we're back in synoptic scale sinking. So I think that in this case, this nicely captures sort of the vertical motion field over the next 48 hours or so, using just two mechanisms, temperature advection and vorticity advection, which are kind of the two biggies. Let me see if I can get into that one. I only got... This is Bob Hart, a PhD student of Jenny Evans, now on the faculty Well, this is not Bob Hart. This is a website that Bob Hart designed. Bob is a very handsome gentleman. Used to work with Rich Grum quite a bit. But I've always loved Bob's coolweather.com website. This is a cross-section time series, times across the bottom. The vertical axis here is pressure in millibars. The variable being plotted is temperature. This establishes that the columns tonight are cold enough for this event to be snow. Here's tonight, 0Z to 12Z. So this is the time period when precipitation is forecast. You're looking at the output from the NAM. So this is a deterministic model. If we then plot vertical velocity on here, only in the lower part of the troposphere, what is outlined here for you is the dendritic growth zone, where dendrites would grow fastest. And you can see tonight there's not really a lot of vertical motion in that very critical zone for getting dendrites to grow. So I'm kind of thinking tonight is maybe an inch of snow. Maybe it falls at the wrong time, that it disrupts the kids in the morning, but I don't think tonight's a big deal. On the other hand, the vertical velocity associated with that next system, this is the one on Saturday afternoon and night, actually intersects with briefly with that key temperature growth zone. So again, I don't know. I would not immediately focus on this first thing and forget about the clipper. Let's take a look then at some plumes, just to see what the SREF is suggesting for amounts. I've really grown to like this SPC plume site quite a bit, in part because you've got the model DT button, which allows you to quickly, of course, if it would default to State College, I would be even happier with it, but it does not. It, for some reason, defaults to Norman, Oklahoma. Don't have my map here. I'm going to close a few things here, just thinking that perhaps we've overloaded the memory, because I really would like to see this, but in order to see this, I need this map. So let me try it again. There we go. When you pick the point closest to State College, it actually says Phillipsburg. Do you know if this is actually State College or if this is actually for PSB? Yeah, because I always wondered if it was off by.
I think it's PSB.
You think it's?
I really think it's.
So it's not UNV.
No.
Okay. So.
It's up on the mountain.
Thanks, Dave. It's up on the mountain. So total snow is still, quite a range there. This is the 15Z, or no, this is the 9Z run. Total snow from this event, the mean is 1 inch, but it's anywhere from 0.2 of an inch of snow to maybe 2.5. It's not a big deal. The Prague DT, the means of the last 4 runs, show that in general, and this is true even for the runs before that, the amount has been slowly coming down with time, though not from lofty values. So you're around an inch. And for sake of time, I'll just state for the record that the GEFS, although this reads in pretty fast, the GEFS is in about the same boat. I love this particular product from EMC because you can adjust the slider down to 84 hours so that it's a direct equivalent to the kinds of products you can get with the SREF, and then pick Phillipsburg. And it's around 1,500 liquid. So, 1 to 2 inches seems, I'm kind of leaning towards the 1. I just think a lot of this is going to dry up. And then kind of the last multi-model product, I know many of you are familiar with this blend of 62 different deterministic model runs, including 25 members of the European ensemble, randomly chosen, 25 members, has a dollop of, I love that Paul Knight word, dollop. Thank you, Paul, if you're listening. A small zone where the probability of getting an inch of snow by 18Z tomorrow is greater than 80%. And it does seem to be centered perhaps in a climatologically favored zone for an easterly flow. So if you believe this multi-model ensemble, we got a pretty good shot at getting at least an inch. But as soon as you back off to 2 inches, the probability is now, it's not negligible, but it's of order 30%. And just for jollies, let me just see the 12Z. So this is the current model thinking. Well, that's 2 inches. There's 1 inch. This is the current model thinking for the 24-hour period ending at 12Z Sunday, which would include the next clipper. And the probabilities of 1 inch are not nearly as high here as they are for the next event. But if I was making a modification to this output, that would be the modification that I might suggest you think about seriously. So it's 12:59. Let's enjoy next week, which on the European, the latest ensemble valid, that is the 500 millibar European ensemble anomaly, valid Wednesday at 12Z. That's a healthy 250 meter 500 millibar height anomaly over the Northeast. So go to Boston for spring break. And that won't feel too bad, unless there's an easterly flow, of course. So I'll stop there since it's 1 o'clock. And if anybody wants to talk or about the weather. Yes, sir.
This time last year, we're coming off the deep freeze.
Honest to goodness, we were.
Anything's better than what we had last year.
No, I totally agree with that. And it's funny, I just did NAO and PNA and that in synoptics today, and I remembered that last winter we did that with very little negative NAO. Now we did that mostly with a positive PNA. If you look back at last February, we were able to put together 2 weeks of unbelievable. I mean, those of you who remember the last 2 weeks of February 2015 were on average 5 degrees colder than the previous record-holding 14-day period. We broke a 2-week record by 5 degrees on the negative side last February. Think about that. That is nuts. And maybe next week we may go the other way.
Think about 70 on one of those?
What's that? 70. Probability of hitting 70 on one of those days in State College.
25% chance.
Okay.
Break 60.
I'm going to go a little higher only because I think there's a couple days when it could happen. So, but it's not huge. DC, yes.
It's about a 90% chance we'll be in the 60s.
Yes. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Last 2 weekends, we have seen temperatures higher than guidance in some cases.
You know what? My one student in 411 did the weather briefing last Friday, and I remember he said, I think it could overperform over Moss on Sunday. And definitely it did, because he remembered the previous week, Moss did very poorly on that one really warm day. It was a very similar synoptic situation. And so Sunday definitely overperformed. In fact, I've been going to open houses for homes, and there have been some really nice Sundays. You bike, you probably...
90 miles the last 3 weekends.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've had some really nice Sundays. I don't think this Sunday will be quite as nice, but it won't be terrible.
That was interesting. I noticed, like, you said the temperature. We've had a lot of really well mixed air masses. Big mixed all the 50.
Yes.
It's weird. This time of year, the old 850 rule, you can never use it in the winter. You can use it this year. A lot.
That's a good point.
Well mixed air masses.
Yeah.
Last February, there was a lot of talk about the stratospheric warming, and that was what was making it so cold here.
I'm not a stratospheric warming expert. I read all of Judah Cohen's stuff.
Okay.
It seems to me that the folks who try to link these things to stratospheric warming, the rules don't work any better than ones I'm familiar with. So, but I'm not going to pretend like I know.
So I feel like I heard at the beginning of February it was starting to warm again.
But
But it never quite happened.
Some of the models forecast to come back.
Okay.
Yeah, go through his flaws. It was always about to come.
Yeah, it was the whole winter.
Yeah.
Those who were hanging on to this being a cold winter, it was always about to come.
Yeah, there were-
And I am going to be interested in the spin that is put on all this by those who, and we had one cold outbreak in February that ended up being dominated by the warmth.
36 hours of cold.
It was 36 hours of
It's chilly.
my dog not wanting to go outside.
There were several well-known seasonal forecasts calling for 2 degrees or more below average for this winter, and they were right within 7 degrees.
Yeah, they were within 7 degrees. That's right.
Within 7 degrees.
Seems like as soon as somebody discovers a new rule for seasonal forecasting, it doesn't work so well in the next 3 years.
The statistical databases aren't long.
No, they're not.
Our statistical knowledge in El Niños, they come in different flavors. There's not vanilla and chocolate.
But when there's a strong El Nino, it seems to me that CPC latches onto it because it's a known quantity, and its forecast looks just like the historical El Nino analogs. And I'm not being critical, I'm just saying.
CDC forecasts, relative to a number of the others.
Right. Relative to a number of the other ones, probably would turn
It was
out.
one of the better ones. The CDC did not do that compared to some of the private sector seasons.
Certainly not with temperature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah, they didn't do that.
not sure what
It's not great.
a properly done statistical measure would grade out on that. Yeah.
I like your comment about the snow. It's been a long time since we've had any really serious snow.
I wonder if it's only 20 years. In the 21st century, we've only had one 10-inch snowstorm in March.
That was that Sunday night we had the Adam.
Yeah, like was it in 20? I wrote this.
11, was it 2011?
I think you're right. It was. I actually wrote it down. March 6th and 7th, 2011. You got a good memory. 10-inch
Only for
snowstorm.
weather.
Only for weather.
Only for my keys are.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to go back to '94 to find.
That was just an Adam front. It rained. It was like 50 degrees out on Sunday morning.
You're talking about in 2011.
Yeah.
I don't have a great memory of that one.
Really one weekend. Very cold and rain and quickly went to sun.
Anyway, I don't want. Yeah, what do you want?
Only only because it came up before you started. I looked at the number. State College, on the high side, it was the 10th warmest of the winter. On the low side, it was the 6th warmest. So it sounds like about 8th warmest average.
And so, what was the actual departure?
4.5.
This one. Dominated, of course, by December.
We're still winning for least snow.
So far, yeah. 16.3, I think we're 1.6
Oh,
short.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
17.9 is the record
17.9
level.
is the record level.
16.3 is what we're at now.
How about that?
So we guess if you want to not say you lived through the least snowiest on record in State College,
We need-
1.6.
Okay.
We have a shot at breaking that.
Yeah. You know,
So was it 3
I think we have a shot at break. How much do we need?
1.6.
1.6. Okay, so
Two events. It's close.
it's going to be close.
We're going to make it by announcement.
Who's taking the odds Sunday morning? Who would that be? Is it Max? You're taking it tomorrow? Thank you all for coming, and I hope everyone has a wonderful spring break.
No weather briefing next week when we come back from break. Charles Ross from the National Weather Service will be here to do a spring flood outlook.